Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to start now. Hello, this is Steve Cantrell with DBA Fundamentals for our last session of September. Today we have Andy Mallon presenting shortcuts from an Impatient DBA. First, we have a few other things to go over. Today we have our sponsor with us again, Kevin Klein. I'm going to let him talk about the sponsor slide, and take it away, Kevin.
Thanks very much, Steve. Hi, everyone. Thanks for carving out an hour of your day. I can tell you that Andy is a very talented DBA and speaker, so I'm really looking forward to this session. Just a quick word about SentryOne as your community sponsor. We are very engaged in the community. There's a lot of resources on this slide. You might want to take a screenshot of it because it's good stuff. There's the SQL Performance blog. There is down towards the bottom under services, there's answers.sqlperformance.com. That's a website where we will actually help you tune queries for free. There's also, just above that, Plan Explorer, which is our very, very popular query tuning product that is so free, we don't even ask for an email address. So if you spend much time writing Transact SQL, please take a look at that product, download it, and start using it. Like I said, we're not going to pastor you or do anything like that. We're not that kind of company. But it's a great useful tool. We use it ourselves internally as well. And finally, I have the trial download link there. If you are in the market for a SQL Server monitoring and alerting tool, we believe we have the best product in the market. And it would do me a great honor if you would give us the chance to earn your business. I think you will not be disappointed with that decision. So with that, thanks so much for your time. Enjoy the session with Andy.
Thanks, Kevin. We have our Slack channel open, and we're taking questions there, and both Andy and Shane are monitoring that. The winner of our first pass comp that we gave away was Barun Pathak. I didn't announce his name last time. We have one more that we're giving away, and everybody that signs up for the classes since the 5th, or the session since the 5th, this session, the last one, and the one in October, so be sure and sign up for that one. That's your last chance to get a full pass comp. The winner of our discount code usage contest has been picked. We've notified the person, and they have not responded yet. So there were 54 uses of it, so there's still the possibility if they don't get back after a short period of time, we'll have to draw another one. Anyway, you can still use this code to save $150 off of pass. Shane is going for the first time this year, and he's looking forward to it. It's a great experience. You really need to think about it if you're a DBA at all. I mean, it's the education, the contacts are unbelievable. These are some of our meetings coming up. This is the one that you need to sign up for if you want to have a chance at the last pass comp, upgrade strategies for highly available SQL Server environments by Edwin Sarmiento. He's one of the best in the business on this, and he's a great speaker. You'll really enjoy the session, and you'll also have a chance to win a pass comp. Pass has many virtual groups with just about every topic and with just about every language. So go out there and give it a shot. Go to Pass's website, join some of these groups, and get a lot more free education. Upcoming SQL Saturdays. Here's some SQL Saturdays coming up. SQL Saturday is events that are in your area that happens on a Saturday, and lots of speakers attend, and you get lots of great free education. It is totally free. you'll pay probably for your lunch, and that's about it. Sponsors pay for everything else, so go, and they'll have all sorts of free goodies that they give away, plus the education and local contacts. It's great. This session will be recorded, and you can get the session and any handouts at dbafund.org and go to the meeting archive section, or you can go to our YouTube site, dbafundtube.org. And since I'm at home today, working from home, watching my granddaughter who's sick at home, she wanted to say one thing.
Hello, bye-bye.
Okay. Here you go, Andy. I'm going to turn. With that, I'll turn it over to you. Let's see.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
I tried to get through it quickly because I think I've been spending too much time on the introductions and not enough time on speakers. So anyway, there you go.
All right. So let me just pull up my slides. Thanks for coming, everyone. There we go. So a little bit about me before we get started. I've been working with SQL Server since 2003 with SQL Server 2000, first tech support, and now as a DBA. I've worked in a whole bunch of different industries from healthcare to e-commerce, and I think two of the most important aspects about me is that I'm incredibly lazy and really impatient. A lot of what I do at work is about making sure that I don't have to do the same thing over and over again, and making sure that it's done quickly. A lot of people think of that as performance tuning and automation, but I think that that's just fueled by me being lazy and impatient. A little bit more about me. I was SentryOne's Community Influencer of the Year for 2016. I'm also on their Product Advisory Council. I organize Boston SQL Saturday. We have an event coming up this Saturday, if anyone is in Boston. And I'm also the user group leader for Boston SQL, a downtown user group here in Boston. And earlier this year, I was awarded my MVP for the data platform from Microsoft. A little bit more about me. I live in Boston, obviously. I organize here. And these are some of the things that I do, and I'm not databasing. A picture of me and my husband, our 2 dogs, and I'm a food nut. I love food. One more biographical thing. I'm a community ambassador for SentryOne, and I'm just going to echo what Kevin said earlier. Plan Explorer and their tools are fantastic. Plan Explorer in particular is a great way that I save time. So if you're not using that, check that out. If you have questions, feel free to ask me about it, and certainly Kevin too, I'm sure. I'll volunteer him for that. If you want to get in touch with me after the session, you can email me, tweet me, visit my blog at any time. If you change your mind that you want to get my contact info, it's at the bottom of every slide. So that's there for you if you don't scratch it down right now. Steve mentioned earlier too that I'll be keeping an eye on the Slack channel. So if questions come through in Slack, I'll try to grab them and notice them while I'm talking. And if not, Shane will barge in and ask questions. But it's the community Slack channel is a great spot to hang out and get your questions answered every day. All right. Take a deep breath now that we're through the intros. Why are we here? I think of this session as a performance tuning session. We're just not performance tuning our code. We're performance tuning ourselves and how we work and how we interact with the computer. So keep that in mind as we go through the talk today. We're going to talk about some Management Studio shortcuts. We're going to talk about keyboard shortcuts and other tricks. And then we're going to talk about some Windows stuff because for the most part, we all use Windows too. And everyone should learn one thing. One of the first times I gave the session, Brent Ozar was sitting in the back corner furiously scribbling down notes. And throughout the whole session, I thought he was taking critical feedback about all of these terrible things that I had messed up during my session. And at the end, he was like, oh, I learned these like 6 things. It was great. So it doesn't matter where you are in your career. There's probably something in here that you should learn and you can take home. And for a handout, if you go to am2.co/cheats, there's a PDF download that has a summary of all of these, in addition to the slides that I'll send over to Steve for you to download afterwards. So let's get to the meat. Let's start talking about some of those shortcuts. This list here is a lot that you probably already know. When I look at people interact with Management Studio, these are the keyboard shortcuts that I see them using. Control Tab to shift tabs, or Control Shift Tab to go backwards. Control R to show or hide the results pane. Control L to get an estimated execution plan. Control M to get the actual execution plan. Comment or uncomment text. Toggle to full screen view. And Control U to move you to the database selection dropdown. I'm not going to talk about those too much because I think a lot of people use them. You might not, but for the most part, we're going to go past those. I think a lot of these have been written about to death. So we're going to talk about some more of them that hopefully you don't know, and I think this is where we'll start to find things that are exciting. So here's the first one, Control Shift V. That's the clipboard ring. If you've ever copied something, gotten an email pop up in the bottom corner of your screen, went to go back, answered the email, went to go back and pasted the thing on your clipboard, and it's the wrong thing, if you can just do Control Shift V, and it'll cycle through the last 15 things on your clipboard. That way, instead of pasting some random email address that you copied during your distracted period, you can paste the thing that you actually wanted to paste, even if it was 2, 3, 4, 5 things back in your history. Control bracket. This is another one that is incredibly useful when you start to get into complicated queries. If you have a lot of nested begin-end or a lot of nested replace statements, anything, it'll work to take you to the corresponding open or close depending on where your cursor is. So you just put your cursor on the start or the end, hit Control bracket, and it'll bounce you to the other half of that. The catch here, of course, is if you don't have the right number of parentheses or the right number of begins and ends, it either won't work because there's a mismatch and it can't figure it out, or it'll take you to the one that it thinks it is. So often I'll put in the extra parenthesis if I think I'm missing one, and then use the control bracket to find where they are, and then use that to parse through to move the one that I added into the right spot. Control Shift M is the next tip. So this is the template replacement box. A lot of the Management Studio comes with a lot of these built in, but you can build your own. Just save your SQL file with this format, and you'll notice that within those angle brackets, on the line where select last name equals, even though that text is inside single quotes, it's not red, it's teal. And that's because Management Studio recognizes that this is a template. It has that format of label, data type, and then default value, and it shows it in teal. When you hit Control Shift M, you'll get that little pop-up. Now you might be thinking, well, I can just use a variable and put the variable at the top of my script. But where this really is helpful is for object names. If you have an object name or a partial object name, you can use the template replacement in that text. And now this can save you from having a script where you have to write dynamic SQL that brings its own challenges. And you can just do a quick replacement, enter your value, and you're off to go. Management Studio query shortcuts. And you can get to this setup on your in the options window. There are 3 that are there that you can't change. but there are 9 options where you can put in your own custom query shortcut. My favorite is select top 10 star from. So you pick one of the available spots, put that in your text, and what it does is when it runs your query, it basically takes, you highlight something in your query window, you hit that key combination, in this case Control-3, and it'll run that query, the part that you have entered in the text box, followed by the part that you highlight, and it just kind of smooshes those together and runs it. So if you use a store procedure, it'll pass through the part that you highlight as the first parameter in that store procedure, or if you do something like select top 10 star from, it just throws it on the end and it becomes your table name. Vertical block highlighting is another incredibly useful thing. I don't know how many times I sat at my keyboard hitting down arrow, comma, down arrow, comma, down arrow, comma, trying to turn a list of columns into a select list. With this, you can hit Alt, Shift, and an arrow, or hold down Alt while you drag, select a vertical block of text, and then type with a vertical cursor. Again, incredibly useful for turning a list of things into an actual query. That one doesn't work in all applications. It does work in some other text editors, but if you try to do that Alt-Shift arrow in Word, it's actually going to move your the paragraph that you have selected up and down. Probably not what you expected, but that was a interesting little thing that I stumbled across as I started to see what shortcuts of these are maybe Windows shortcuts that are used everywhere, and which ones of these are unique to Management Studio. And this is one that I found implemented in a lot of text editors, but certainly not universal. So what about some other Management Studio tricks? You can customize keyboard shortcuts for virtually every action in Management Studio. So if you find that you're constantly going to a toolbar to hit a button or a menu to select something from a drop-down, you can actually set up a keyboard shortcut for that. In my case, I'm used to using Control-W to close tabs in my web browser. Control-W is not the default setting for that action in Management Studio. It's Control-F4. So I have a blog post that you can go to, am2.co/remap SSMS, and it'll show you step-by-step everything you need to do that in order to add additional shortcuts or change existing ones. Did you know Management Studio has a built-in web browser and that URLs in your code are clickable? This is incredibly helpful if you want to, you grab a piece of code from the internet and you want to attribute where you got that code from. Or if you have an internal wiki or documentation site where you have more information about this code. Or maybe it's the web page that calls the store procedure. Whatever it is, you can put the URL right in a comment, and then with Control-click, it'll take you right there. So it can save you, especially for documentation, save you having to bounce around into different applications. In Management Studio, if you click a tab and drag it out of your Management Studio window, it'll undock that window and kind of float over to the side. This is really helpful when you're trying to maybe work off of one result set to work on another query. You can bring it up if you have a dual monitor or a wide monitor, dock one window on one side, another window on the other, and then you don't have that that workflow where you're constantly switching back and forth between tabs. And this is something that works in Chrome, most web browsers. A lot of tab UIs have similar behavior. The one thing that's a little bit different in Management Studio is it doesn't recreate when you drag that window out to float. It doesn't recreate the entire Management Studio experience. The floating tab is just your text tab or your result tab. And then the execute buttons, all of those other buttons are going to be back on the main Management Studio window. Another tip for when you're writing a query, in Object Explorer, if you grab the columns folder from underneath a table and drag that over, it will print out the entire list of columns. So if you need to get most of the columns for a query, you can drag them all over and then delete the ones that you don't. Or even if you need all of them, because we all know you shouldn't put select star in your production code in case the column list changes in the future. And my favorite part about this is that it doesn't include the brackets around the column names, because I find the brackets around column names to be a frustrating distraction, and then I end up going back through and replacing them. Commenting out your comments is another thing that I find to be maybe one of the most useful tips that I use myself. And this one's a little tricky, so pay attention to the GIF on this slide. You start the comment with /star on one line by itself, and then you end the comment with --/. And while it's like that, the stuff in the middle is commented out. So if you have some sort of debugging code or something that you want to make sure someone doesn't open the script and run the whole thing and runs a delete statement before making an edit to it, you put that around it. But then when you want to uncomment it to use it as part of your script, you just add the -- to the open comment, and it comments out the open comment. The open and close are now both commented out, and the entire script will run just fine. Someone in the Slack channel asks, does Control-KU comment out the / style comments too? It will, if you use the shortcut for Control-KU, which will uncomment a line, that will just remove the -- from the start. So in the demo, I'm typing -- but you can also imagine me hitting Control-KC to add the 2 dashes, or Control-KU to remove the 2 dashes. Wildcards are another thing that I like to briefly mention. Everyone is familiar with the multi-character wildcard, where stuff is like something, in this example, like THI% would give you 3 results. It'd give you this is a multi-character wildcard, and this is boring, I know this. Andy, this isn't a tip. What are you talking about? Well, I recently realized a lot of people don't know that underscore is a single character wildcard, where stuff like THI_ would just give you 1 row for this. Execute code as a different user. This requires impersonate permission, or it requires sysadmin permission. But I use this all the time, and I think it's really important when someone comes to you with a permissions problem. You don't need their login. You don't need them to actually test it. You can do all of that yourself. So in this case, you would say execute as login equals login name, and then you would run the test. In this example that I have here, I'm executing the script as sysadmin. I say execute login as app user, select star from AM2 DBO test, and you get the error message. Now I can go back. I can adjust the permissions, make sure it works for the user. Maybe it takes 2 or 3 attempts to get it just right. And then I can go back to the user and tell them you're all set. It's much better customer service than having to go back and forth and say, can you test this? Does it work now? Does it work now? Does it work now? And it's better security because you don't have to know the password for that login. The most important thing is to remember to revert. Revert is the inverse command of the execute as login. And if you don't revert, you get stuck in that user's context. And if you run the execute as login 5 times, you then have to revert 5 times in order to get out and get back to yourself. So you can end up with getting yourself confused as far as what login you're running in the context of. Now we'll talk about a couple of settings in Management Studio that are really helpful for me. Shane, before I jump into these, have we had any questions yet come up that I've missed or that have come through in the GoToMeeting?
Not a lot of questions, although actually 2 people pointed out that in SSMS 2017 the brackets get put in when you drag the columns across, which a lot of people have probably been annoyed about.
That stinks.
Yeah.
Although I'm using SSMS 17 and I don't think I've noticed that. Maybe I'll have to go back and double check myself.
2 dropped in there. Can you execute as a role or security group, or does it always need to be a specific user?
When you're using the execute as login, it has to be a specific user. So if you're testing a security group or a role, you'd have to find someone from that group, and you'd have to make sure that that person wasn't also in some other group or have some additional permissions as well.
Okay. Yeah, 2 people come back saying it's in either 17.3 or 17.2. They added square brackets.
Shucks.
Yeah.
I hate those square brackets.
I like them to get rid of the different fonts. I don't like my words to be blue and then black and blue and then black. It annoys me. We have someone saying if you execute as login, does it change the login user in the tab heading?
It does not change the login user in the tab heading because you're still logged in. If you look at sysdm exec sessions, there are 2 columns in there. I forget what they're called, but one of them would have your original login, and the other column would have the login that your current context is. So you are able to see both aspects of it, and SQL Server and Management Studio are both well aware of the difference between the user that you're logged in as for your session and the user that you're impersonating and running the code as.
All right, cool. There's one more, but I'm going to leave it because it's about a shortcut, and I want to see if you mention it, and then I'll mention it if you don't.
Okay, sounds good. So a couple of settings that we'll talk about in Management Studio. Displaying results to a separate tab instead of being in the bottom half of your results grid. It'll display to another tab and take up your full screen. This is really useful when you're presenting and you're on a projector, or you're on just your 13-inch laptop screen, or any other time when you really want that full real estate of your full screen for your results and for your code. And it's important to note that when you do this, Control-R, the shortcut that takes you to the results pane, no longer works. And it doesn't work because there's no results pane. They're going to a separate tab instead. And you need to use F6 to switch to that tab. And if you have multiple result sets, F6 will actually take you first to the first result set, and then the second result set, and then the third result set, and then the fourth result set. And when it runs out of result sets, it'll take you back to the query tab. And you can use Shift F6 to go in the opposite direction. So if you have a lot of result sets and you F6 to the first one, you can then Shift F6 to go right back to your query. Include query in result set. This is another one that when I get a new computer or a new install of Management Studio, I go straight to the setting, and it's one of the first things I set. It's important for a few reasons. For me, I lose track. I have complete ADHD. I get a pop-up of a text or a tweet. I forget what I'm doing, or you're running a long-running query, and you're like, wait, is the one that I have highlighted the one that just finished, or is it the one that I'm doing next? And I get lost. So this way, in the Messages tab, it'll print out the query that just finished running. So when you go back, you can know whether the thing that you have highlighted in the query tab is the thing that just ran or the thing that you're about to run but hadn't hit F5 yet. It's also really great for when a user comes to you and says, excuse me, can you run this query just this one time? I need to get this information. You sort out the query, you run it, you send them the results. Invariably, next week, next month, next year, they come back again and say, here's this file you sent me last month. Can you reproduce the exact same thing again? It wasn't one time. I actually need it again. If you ran the query with including the result set, and you gave it to them, especially if you do the results to text and get the results and query all together in one text file. Now, when they come back to you, you go back to that original file, and you have both the query that generated it and the results. And I'll say that auditors really like getting query results in that format. If they ask for your list of sysadmins and you run a query to get it, it doesn't necessarily prove that the query you ran and the results match, because you're just sending them a text file and you could have edited the text file. But really what you're doing is you're testing that the query and the results match by sending it to them. And they like that because they can see it in one spot, what you ran and the results that you gave. And if they don't like some filter or something that you put on the query, they can then tell you to change it, assuming that they're savvy enough to figure that out. Line numbers in Management Studio. This is super helpful, especially since error messages, maybe not reliably, but error messages often give you a line number that your error occurred on. You go into the options, text editor, transact equal, general, mark this checkbox, and then you get line numbers. So now when your query error message says incorrect syntax on line 4, you go to line 4 and you can find it. In Slack, Daniel says, tip, double-click on the error message and it'll move the cursor shield to that line unless that line is inside a stored procedure, in which case it'll just take you to the stored procedure because it doesn't have the full text. Great tip, Daniel. Scroll bar map mode. This is really helpful, sometimes more than others. You can go in and change the behavior of your scroll bar so that it looks like a little map that shows you the actual query. This becomes really helpful if there's a pattern of the query where you want to go to, where you know there's this big long chunk of text or halfway through the query. I find that it's often a little bit easier to find that specific spot if you're familiar with the query when you've got the big map and you can just click and take yourself right there. In this example, if you look closely to the tiny little text in the map, there's one green line right in the middle. And if that green line of comment is exactly the spot that you want to go to, it's really easy to find that by scrolling there without having to slowly scroll through the entire query. Also, it looks really cool, which as a DBA, you don't get to look really cool very often. So I take that whenever I can. How many people out there go to close out Management Studio at the end of the day or the end of the week because you haven't rebooted and Windows patches have rolled out, and you get this? And if you're me, I almost never close tabs. So this will be like 100 tabs that are open. And if I haven't saved it, a lot of times I don't really care. And more often than not, if there's more than 4 or 5 things here, I just click no and I throw away my changes and figure that the time that I lost by not saving changes, I saved by not going through this list of 100 open queries. Well, starting in Management Studio 2016, there's a checkbox, prompt to save, unsave T-SQL query windows on close. Unmark that checkbox and you won't get prompted anymore. Now, just as a word of caution, that means if you close your Management Studio, you're not going to get the idiot box that pops up and says, hey, you didn't save this query. It will still prompt you if if you've saved the query and have unsaved changes, I believe, I should have double-checked this beforehand, I believe that it will only save you if it's never, it'll only ignore this if it's never been saved, as opposed to something that was saved and then had a change. You can change the batch separator in Management Studio to not be Go. Go isn't actually a transact SQL keyword. It is something that is implemented by the application, by Management Studio, by SQL CMD. You can change it to be anything that you want. Why would you want to change it? I don't know. It seems you would break lots of scripts that you have. Everyone else's script that has a Go in it would now not work because Go wouldn't be a valid keyword. But you could have some fun. If your coworker leaves their computer unlocked, you could change the batch separator to select. And then when they run queries, nothing will work right. But I feel the need to say this disclaimer. It's really funny to change the batch separator to select, and really not funny to change it to where. Because if you change it to where, and then they run a delete statement, it will end the statement before the where clause, and you will have just made your coworker run a delete without a where clause. And that stops being funny, especially if they did it in production. So it's a great way to troll your coworkers, but it's also a great way to get fired if you're not careful about how you do it. The service account. I feel like if you've ever worked in a large environment where you've got a bunch of SQL servers, every once in a while you come up with this problem of like, what's the service account? And I used to have all sorts of weird workarounds to try to figure out what account was running SQL Server on that server to see if there was a problem there. Well, apparently, I hadn't noticed that since 2010, it was in a DMV. SysDM Server Services, introduced in 2008 R2 Service Pack 1, and it lists a whole bunch of useful information that I've had wonky workarounds that I've been using since 2003 to figure out when the service started, what account is running it, and it'll show you all of the SQL components that are installed on the machine. So you can see if SQL Agent is running, if SSRS is running, how long they've been running, what accounts are running them. Incredibly helpful, and saves me all of these weird workarounds of using XP command shell or figuring out startup time by inferring it from when tempdb was created. Nope, you get the actual answers right here. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of water, and I'm going to ask Shane if he has any questions queued up for me before we switch and start talking about some Windows shortcuts.
No, this is actually the first webinar I've had where it's not so much questions, and more like, you know, oohs and ahs coming in, you know?
All right. Then let's talk about some Windows shortcuts. So the WinKey shortcuts are also some that I use all the time. WinR will bring up the run command. WinE brings up Windows Explorer. WinL will lock your computer. Control-Alt-End is the same as Control-Alt-Delete, but when you're in a remote desktop session. WinX brings up a menu with a bunch of shortcuts to Control Panel and other stuff. Control and the scroll wheel will zoom you in or out, excuse me, in a lot of apps, including the text editor of Management Studio. Not the results grid, just the text editor. These are all super helpful. I actually found when Windows 8 came out and everyone was upset that there was no more start menu in Windows, I have to say, I didn't care, because most of the applications I open, I hit WinR, and then I type SSMS, enter. Or I type Excel, enter. I don't use the start menu that often. So probably the most opened applications I have are things like MS Paint, Calculator, and Management Studio. some more of these Windows shortcuts are the Windows key and the arrow keys. So you can dock windows to the left or right of your current monitor. If you use the Windows key and up and down, it will either maximize it or minimize it, or go to that restore state in the middle that is neither maximized nor minimized and also has no name. And this is helpful. In particular, sometimes you have your laptop connected to a monitor at work, and then you unplug it and go home, or you unplug it and go into a conference room, open it up again, and that application you want is like on the monitor that's not plugged in anymore. Well, if you can select it by Alt-Tab or whatever, you can use the Win key and the left-right keys to slide it first to the side, left and right of the monitor it's on, but then you keep going, and you can have an application that'll dance across all of your monitors from left to right or right to left, depending on which way you're doing it. So you can find your keyboards again, or your windows again, by doing that. And if you're on Windows 10, in addition to docking left or right, you can actually hit Win left up, and it'll dock in the upper left-hand corner. So if you're on a massive monitor, you can actually use these keyboard shortcuts to dock 3 or 4 windows all on the monitor at the same time. Virtual desktops. This is another really helpful shortcut that I find I use all the time. I'll have one desktop with one set of work on it, another desktop with another set of work, and use the Win, Control, left, right buttons to switch back and forth. So honestly, this is something that Mac users have had for a while, and Windows only introduced in Windows 10, so it's still new for a lot of us Windows folk. But just to take a quick demonstration, if I hit Control, Win, and the arrow key, that switched me to a completely different monitor. And now you're looking at my Management Studio. And now if I hit the other key and go back, now it takes me back to the other monitor that I was on, and you're back to my PowerPoint. So for me, a lot of times, that switching between maybe email and Management Studio, or PowerShell and Management Studio, or cat videos on YouTube and real work. But it's a really great way to go back and forth and see, without having to Alt-Tab and go back and forth between windows. I find I get myself really confused with Alt-Tab sometimes, and especially like a floating window that's on top, and maybe you've got 2 windows open side by side, and you're bouncing back and forth between those, and then there's a third window that you're using as reference. If you start multitasking like that, it can get to be a lot really fast, and you can lose your place. So that's where virtual desktops really come in handy. I've got a few other Windows tricks here that I've compiled over the years. This one is really cool. You can create a folder, give it that very specific name, and it creates a folder that contains flattened everything in your control panel. So if you don't like the newer control panel, where it has, you've got to dig and be like, oh, well, I want the users thing, and now I want this other thing within users. You can create a flattened control panel with everything all at once. And in fact, the special thing here is the GUID in the curly brackets. The first part where I say admin, that could be anything. What it's actually doing is, I call them magic GUIDs. There's a whole list of those from Microsoft. And all you have to do is use this format of a label, a dot, and then the GUID inside the brackets, and you can get shortcuts to most things on Control Panel. And it works on all versions of Windows starting in Windows 7. Microsoft has a list of all of their canonical names of Control Panel items where you can get those. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with some of the newer Windows 10 style settings with that settings panel, but it does work on Control Panel things. And of course, I wouldn't be a DBA if I didn't say it depends. There are some cases where it doesn't work because, like, the Windows feature isn't there. So, for example, Windows 10 has a different Windows Update mechanism. So, Windows Update that GUID will only work on Windows 7 or Windows 8. If you want to get to the MPIO control panel, that only exists on server operating systems. So, trying to use that shortcut will only work if you're on a server OS. It wouldn't work on your Windows 10 desktop. Run as a different user. I don't know about you guys, but I have two logins at work. I've got my regular login, and I've got one that is a local admin on all of my servers. If I want to connect to a server using sysadmin, I have to use my admin user. But when I log into my machine, I use my regular user. Any large company or highly regulated industry, usually you run into that. Well, all you have to do is hold down Shift when you right-click on a shortcut, or just right-click on the Windows 10 Start menu, and you get this Run as Different User option. And because I'm completely OCD, it drives me nuts that if you right-click on the desktop shortcut, it says Run as Different User. But if you do it on Windows 10, it says Run as a different user. So it's just me. Drives me nuts. But anyway, it'll open up the window where you type in your credentials, and then you're running Management Studio as that user's context. And it works with any application. This isn't just a Management Studio thing. This is a Windows thing. So you can run applications in the context of a different user. This can also be helpful if you're trying to, if you're working with someone to debug application permissions, and the application itself runs using Windows Integrated Authentication, and you need to run the application as someone else in order to debug what's going on. PowerShell remoting, enter PS session as a command from PowerShell. This is really, really incredibly useful. I describe it, if you're not a PowerShell person, as remote desktop for PowerShell. If you're a Linux person, it's like SSHing to the console. You type enter PS session, the server name, and then enter, and now that command prompt on your desktop is running commands for that remote console. So you can connect to a server and run some commands on the server without ever having to remote desktop to it. So if you need to IP config or ping from the server to see if it can connect to some other server, enter PS session, server name, then just ping, and you're ready to go. Here's another one that I find myself asking frequently. Well, maybe not frequently. Frequently enough that it comes up every once in a while. You've got something going on with the server, and someone asks, well, is lock pages in memory enabled? Is the server configured the right way? From the command prompt, you can type whoami/priv, or if you have XP command shell enabled, you can type it whoami/priv. And what that does is that runs for the current user context. So you'd have to run it as the service account, which XP command shell kind of lets you do as long as you don't have a proxy account set up. And that'll output a bunch of permissions for that user, and one of them is whether lock pages in memory is enabled. So now let's combine those last couple of shortcuts. Run PowerShell as a different user by doing the shift right click and run it as maybe your admin user or as the service. In this case, we're going to do the service account for that server. Use enter PS session to start a session on that remote server. And now you use whoami/priv to get that information. So in just a couple of seconds on your keyboard, you can open PowerShell. Maybe you did Win-R, type PowerShell, and enter to open the window. Oh wait, no, you didn't, because you had to, sorry, you can't do that because you had to open it as a different user, and there's a different way to do that from the command prompt, but I digress. So you opened PowerShell as a different user, you type enter PS session server name. The second line, you're on that server, you type whoami/priv, and you get your information, and you can see that locked pages in memory is enabled. And the other thing that shows up here that DBAs are often interested in is the perform volume maintenance tasks permission that lets you do instant file initialization. Here's another fun trick, not for production, and maybe a great party trick. There's this registry key that you can go to where you can create crash on control scroll, set the value to a binary 1. Now when you hold the right control key and tap the scroll button, the scroll lock button twice, it will blue screen your computer. This is maybe of limited use. It tells you that it's a manually initiated crash. But if you're testing out hardware, if you're testing out configuration, testing out your new HA scenario, sometimes you do want to crash a computer, and you want it to crash hard. And you want to make sure that you can recover from that hard crash. And this is a great way to do it. You probably want to change that setting back so that you don't leave it like that. But it is a really great thing to try out. Last one, pausing the SQL Server service. So it allows people that are connected to continue working, but prevents new connections. So you go into the services control panel, you hit the pause button, and then you stare at it. It'll prevent new users from getting in, but everyone who's currently in there, who's currently running a query, can continue running their query. Their session will stay alive for as long as they want. This is incredibly helpful just before a maintenance window. Maybe there's like that one job that's still running that you can't kill, and as soon as that job is finished, you can start your maintenance. But you have a maintenance window, so people are expecting it to be down. So you pause the SQL Server service. The database seems down for new connections, but that thing that you have to let finish running can finish running, and then when it's done, you're good to go. It's also helpful if you're having a scenario where maybe CPU is through the roof, pegged at 100%, and you want to get the number of connected users to come down a little bit and then let people back in. You can pause the service, let some of those connections bleed off till your CPU comes back down to something manageable, and then try starting it again. And maybe it won't be so bad that next time. And it's a lot quicker than having to completely restart the entire service, and also a little bit less interruptive. All right. That was my last trick. So now I'm curious what everyone else's shortcuts and tips are. You can either put them in the chat window. Shane will go through them. If you put them on Slack, I'll try to field some now, and then I can go back and answer some more. Shane, you said there's a shortcut that someone mentioned earlier, and I hadn't said yet. I'm curious if I got to it or if it's something new.
You didn't actually get to it, but I think you skipped past that whole topic. It was when you create a new object and the IntelliSense hasn't refreshed yet, how you get rid of those red squiggly lines.
Yes. So this probably has happened to everyone where IntelliSense gives you the red squiggly lines and tells you that the object doesn't exist, when you know full well that object exists. I can never remember the keyboard shortcuts for it. I always just go to, let's see here, I have Management Studio open, so I'm going to cheat. Where's my cursor? And I think my mouse batteries died. Well, that's fun. Oh no, there's my mouse batteries. I just lost my cursor. So you open a new query window. I just go to Edit, IntelliSense, Refresh Local Cache. So the shortcut is Control-Shift-R, but obviously I haven't learned that one yet because I still have to use the menu. What other shortcuts do people have? Either Windows shortcuts that they love, or Management Studio shortcuts?
I got one actually from Tyler Saturn, and I said I'd tell it to you. It's if you change the shortcut icon to read Windows System 32 run as exe, it can save the credentials, and you won't have to go through the whole shift right click.
Oh yeah, that's another one. So I frequently do that as well. So if you go to, and I alluded to this when I was talking. So if you have a shortcut and you say run as, I forget the exact syntax, but I usually do run as net only a Mallon, and then it would be SSMS.exe, probably the full path. Oh, my screen stopped sharing. Why did it do that?
Did you hit Control and then scroll out twice?
Maybe.
You'll crash the screen.
Here we go. I think I accidentally paused by some keyboard shortcut I hit. So you do run as net only your username and the shortcut. And the reason I do net only there is so with the net only shortcut or net only attribute, it only changes your context when it connects to outside your computer, when it connects to the server, but locally it still runs in your user context. And with Management Studio, that's helpful because getting to your My Documents folder and stuff, you probably want it to be like your regular user account instead of the random user account. I also remind people not to, you can include your password in the command line so that it doesn't prompt you at all. I usually tell people not to do that because you don't want your password stored in clear text on your computer. It's probably bad.
CK has it going actually in the Slack channel if you can see it there.
Yes. Shift right click copy as path on folders and files. So here, right click, sorry, shift right click and copy as path. So when you do that, it will copy. I'll paste it up here in the line, in the top part. It includes the full path. That way, when you're like, you want to get the path to the file and your 25 directory is deep, you can do that shift right click and get that. That's a good one. Thanks, CK. I might add that one to my presentation, actually.
You've mentioned templates, but somebody has also mentioned code snippets. Now, are they the same things or are they different?
So the code snippets, let me go, geez, everything landed on the wrong monitor. So the templates are, they're here from the view tools. So there's the code snippets here. These are the same thing. So each of these uses the template feature. I refer to them wholesale as templates, but these are the code snippets. It gives you a path. You can add more, so you can put your own code snippets in here. But these are create index basic. These are all sorts of shortcuts. I'm trying to remember how I get the little pane to the side to show up. Oh well. You can have your code snippets, all of them show up in the pane over here on the right, so that this guy over here, you can have, where I have the Solution Explorer, you can dock all your code snippets there, and then you don't have to remember the syntax, the full complicated syntax for create index or alter database. Alter database is one of those syntaxes that I have to look up almost every time I use it. which is not infrequently, and you'd kind of think I would have learned it by now, but I haven't. So you can have your code snippets over there, and a lot of those code snippets have the templates in them for you to do find and replace on object names.
I knew this would happen. Somebody asked what your Spotlight tool was.
So this tool here is the Logitech Spotlight pointer. So I use this little guy when I present, and if I zoom in here, one of the buttons on it is Spotlight, so that you can point, and in webinars it's way better than a laser pointer. And if you're in a big conference room where you've got either people in the way back or you've got multiple screens up, it shows on every screen.
Someone's mentioned F7 for Object Explorer, I think it is.
Yeah, so let's see here. If we go over to Object Explorer, I don't want to connect to analysis services. Connect to the database engine, and then if you select something and hit F7, it brings up the Object Explorer details pane, and the Object Explorer details pane is similar to Object Explorer, but one of the helpful things here is you can multi-select once you're in the details pane. And now that you've multi-selected, you can right-click, script as, create to, new query editor window, and now you can script out multiple objects all at the same time.
Damn.
You can also add additional columns here, so you can see row counts. That's not a very useful thing here. Let's go to AdventureWorks. It'll have some more useful row counts. So you can see a bunch of extra stuff and save yourself when you're looking for the biggest table in the database. It's a little slow. It's not the fastest way to do it. But if I shouldn't say that, it's not the fastest way to do it if you're going to do it 1,000 times. But if you're just going to do it once, this is probably the fastest way to do it.
Definitely. Someone's asking what that Spotlight thing was. Could you just shout the name out again?
It's the Logitech Spotlight presentation mouse. Geez, I should get commission for this. It's if you're in the U.S., it's about $120 on Amazon. I can't do currency conversion because I'm an American and we're not good at that. But check your local Amazon shop for it. It's very cool if you do a lot of presentations. It also just buzzed a second ago to tell me that I've been talking for an hour. So
I was just going to say we've literally hit the mark there.
Excellent. And the mouse knew before I did.
God. All right, thanks, Andy. That was amazing, actually. I'm still getting people coming in with comments, like with queries and tips and shortcuts, but definitely a lot of, oh my God, and I didn't know that, and that would save me so much time.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to hang out in the DBA Fundamentals Slack channel for a little bit longer after the session, so if people have some questions, feel free to hang out there, and I'll try to scroll back and catch things that I might have missed as well. Thanks for having me, Shane.
No worries. Thank you for doing the session. Thank you so much. I think Steve has a couple of things to kind of wrap up with, but that should hopefully be all from me.
Great.
So thanks again, Andy.
Thanks. Back to you, Steve.
Yes, thanks. That was fantastic. I can see myself spending a lot of time going over the video again and again and again and trying these things out in a development or sandbox server, because if somebody didn't get something out of this, they're too brilliant for the rest of us. So anyway, I appreciate it. Hopefully you can come back again sometime. This was a great presentation.
Yeah.
First one you ever gave for us, so we appreciate it.
I'd love to come back sometime.
Oh, definitely. I'll start talking to you about next year then. We have our final session in the contest to win the PASS Comp coming up October the 3rd with Evan Sarmiento, so sign up for that and be sure you're a member of PASS. because you have to have that as a requirement to win the pass comp. You'd have to do that anyway. So, but actually, the last time I drew it, somebody wasn't a member of pass. They weren't the first one drawn, but if it would have got down to them, they would have lost out on it because of that. And also, Shane announced probably back in August that we were looking for one more person to help us with these sessions. Shane coming on has helped me immensely because as you've seen before, I make enough errors and enough mistakes, we want to clean things up and do a better job of what we do. So we'd like to have another person, and we've had some interest, and we're kind of coming close. But I wanted to say one more time that if you're interested, let us know. Either contact me or Shane or dbafundamentals.org. Anyway, we'll see you 2 weeks from now for our next session, first session in October. Thanks again, Andy.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, good deal. I got the session stopped, or the recording stopped that time. If it doesn't get stopped fast enough, takes a while for it to come up. Yeah, this one, I'll get this one up pretty quickly.
Okay, cool. And I'll shoot you an email with my slides attached as well, so that if you want to post those online, you can.
Oh yeah, because I think they will want to go over this and again and again and again. So there's going to be a lot of views on YouTube. People are going to go over and say, "Let me try that again," because there was you were chock full of so many things.
Yeah, it's kind of a rapid fire session the way that I go through it, but I try to cram as much as I can and all at once.
Well, I can see why you had Brennan Ozar even writing down 6 or 7 things. There's some things I'd never even thought of, and those were fantastic. So, yeah, this is some cool stuff. Anyway, thank you, and I'll get with you. And we usually don't schedule anybody within 6 months. We haven't even started scheduling into just the first month of 2018. So I'll talk to you a little bit later and maybe try to figure out some time. And I don't know, do you have any other sessions that you, or is this the first one you've done, or have you got other sessions you've done?
I have a couple other sessions. So we can follow up. I'll send you those topics, and we can pick a topic and pick a time.
Okay, good deal.
All right. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Bye.
Bye.